My mother's name was Ava Thompson, and for the first 14 years of my life, she was the only fair thing in our house. When she was alive, fairness had rules, simple ones. My brother Ethan got help with his homework, so did I. He got taken out for a birthday dinner at his favorite restaurant, so did I. He got praised when he worked hard, and so, somehow, miraculously, did I. It wasn't perfect. No family is. But it was even. It was livable. Then cancer took her in October, when I was 14, and the house split cleanly in two before the leftover casseroles were even gone from the refrigerator. Ethan was 16, tall, easy to like, already learning how effortless life became when people handed you the center of every room you walked into. My father, Richard Thompson, loved him the way certain men love their own legacy. Loudly, proudly, and without a flicker of self-awareness about how that love looked from the outside. Me, he loved in theory. In practice, I became the child who could handle it. Whatever it happened to be that week. At my mother's funeral, her closest friend, a woman named Maria Callahan, found me standing alone near the back pew, hands jammed in the pockets of a coat that didn't fit right anymore. She held my face in both hands and said something I didn't fully understand for years. "Your mother made me promise I would never let you disappear." At 14, I thought she meant emotionally. I thought it was just something kind adults say to grieving kids. It would take me almost 2 decades to learn that my mother had signed actual legal paperwork in her final weeks, guardianship clauses, trust language, instructions tucked into a file most people never see until it's far too late to matter. She didn't trust what would happen to me once she was gone. She had seen the tilt in our family long before I had the words to describe it myself. The years after that were a slow, thorough education in being treated like background furniture. Ethan got a car for his 16th birthday. I was told the bus still ran fine. Ethan's bedroom got repainted twice in 2 years because he didn't like the shade. I wore a winter coat with a broken zipper for 3 months because asking for a replacement felt like asking a bank for a loan they'd already decided to deny. One night in high school, I asked my father for money for textbooks. He didn't even look up from the television. "Ask your brother," he said. I had already given him the receipt. The household budget, like our entire childhood, functioned like a department with an uneven manager, and he had already decided which employee was worth investing in. So I started working breakfast shifts at a diner outside Columbus before school. At 16 years old, I was pouring coffee for truckers at 5 in the morning, walking into first period with the smell of grease still in my hair, and studying at night while my brother was off at golf lessons my father happily paid for. The ugly part isn't that I struggled. Plenty of teenagers struggle. The genuinely ugly part is how good I got at convincing myself it was normal. On my 17th birthday, my father forgot to come home for dinner because he was at Ethan's regional baseball banquet. On my high school graduation day, he arrived 40 minutes late, just in time to ask whether I could move my boxes out of the hallway before Ethan's friends came over for a party that night. The photos from that year tell the whole story without me needing to say another word. In one, I'm holding an honor cord, squinting into the sun, alone in the frame. Posted that same day on my father's Facebook page, a photo of Ethan smiling beside him at a sports bar, caption, "Proud of my boy." That became the rhythm of my entire life. At 19, when I made the dean's list, nobody called. At 21, when I passed my licensing exam, my father left me a voicemail 6 days later that opened with, "Hey, quick question, you know a good lender? Ethan's thinking about refinancing his car." At 23, when I closed my first real estate deal, Maria showed up at my tiny apartment with cupcakes, while my father posted photos from Ethan's weekend trip with the caption "Boys Trip." At 26, the year I hit my first 6-figure income in Columbus real estate, I opened my phone to see my father sharing Ethan's job promotion with the words, "Sons carry the family forward." Once, after one too many bourbons at a 4th of July barbecue, he said the quiet part out loud to one of his golf buddies while I stood 6 feet away holding a tray of paper plates. "Daughters are easier," he told him. "Sons are the future." I don't think he even registered that I'd heard it. Or maybe he did, and simply assumed I would do what I always did, swallow it, smile, and clean up the plates. There were nights I almost gave up entirely. Ohio winters are unforgiving when you're young, broke, and too proud to ask for help. I lived above a laundromat for 2 years, fell asleep to the hum of a space heater, and learned to budget by deciding which bill could survive being a week late without consequences. Maria offered me money more than once. She'd slide an envelope across her kitchen table and say, quietly, "Your mother left enough behind that you do not need to suffer like this." Every single time, I pushed it back. Not out of pride for pride's sake, I wanted, stubbornly, fiercely, to know that whatever life I eventually built would be mine. Not borrowed. Not pitied. Not something that could later be reframed as a favor I owed someone. I told myself success would fix the story. If I worked hard enough, built enough, earned enough, surely they would finally have to see me. Surely competence would become the language love finally learned to speak in our family. Instead, success only made me useful. The more financially stable I became, the more my family began looking at me the way people look at a generator humming in the garage during a power outage. Not as a daughter. Not even as a person, exactly. As a resource. Something dependable you will out when the lights go off, and otherwise ignore. I thought becoming strong would earn their respect. Instead, it only taught them exactly how much more they could ask me to carry, while never once offering to help carry anything of mine. The call that changed everything came when I was 29, in the middle of one of the busiest closing seasons of my career, my weekends barely registering as real anymore. My father hadn't called me in almost 3 years. No birthday check-in. No Thanksgiving invitation. No simple "how are you?" Just silence, year after year, until one ordinary Wednesday afternoon his name lit up my phone like nothing had ever happened between us. "Your brother needs a proper place," he said, less than 30 seconds into the call. "He's serious about a girl from a good family. Renting doesn't look stable. Help him out." Not "would you consider helping him?" Not "if it's possible." A directive. The same tone you'd use telling someone to grab milk on the way home from work. The girl was Brooke Harrington, daughter of a wealthy, well-connected Columbus family. Country club ties. Board memberships. The kind of polished, old-money Ohio social standing my father had spent his entire life admiring from a respectful distance and never quite reaching. I understood immediately what he was asking. Ethan needed a better backdrop for his life. I was being asked to build the set. There's a very specific kind of humiliation in realizing that the first moment your family truly believes in your success is the exact moment they've found a way to spend it on someone else. I wish I could tell you I laughed and hung up the phone. I didn't. Some bruised, hopeful part of me still wanted the miracle. Maybe, I thought, if I did something big enough, generous enough, undeniable enough, the math of our family would finally change. Maybe if I gave my brother a house, I would stop being the daughter who made it on her own, and finally become the daughter they were proud to claim out loud, in public, the way they claimed him. So I bought a 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Crest Drive in Dublin, Ohio. A deep backyard, a fully renovated kitchen, the kind of polished charm that impresses people who equate granite countertops with character. The price was $572,000. I paid in cash. And I kept the deed in my own name, which turned out to be the single smartest decision I made in this entire story. That decision wasn't even mine, not really. It was Maria's. She sat across from me at dinner the week before closing, narrowed her eyes, and said, "If you are determined to do something this reckless, at least do not surrender legal reality along with your emotional dignity." She made copies of every document herself and locked one full set in her own safe, just in case. At the time I thought she was being overly cautious. I would later owe her more than I can ever repay. Ethan moved in a week after closing. He hugged me in the driveway, called me the best sister in the world, and never once, not once, asked why none of the paperwork had his name anywhere on it. Looking back now, that should have told me everything I needed to know. At first, the erasure was gentle enough that I could explain it away to myself. Thanksgiving was small this year. Christmas moved to Brooke's parents' house because her family had already planned everything. My father's birthday dinner was just immediate people. Then the omissions became visible, undeniable, almost theatrical. On the 4th of July, I drove past the house on my way to a client showing and saw Ethan in the backyard grilling beside a giant banner reading "New Home" with Brooke under glowing string lights, her friends taking photos, my father laughing on the patio like he had personally laid every brick with his own hands. Nobody had invited me to the housewarming. For the house I bought. A month later, a client meeting ran long in that same neighborhood, and, by accident or some cruel instinct, I drove past the street again. A Harrington family SUV sat in the driveway. Catered trays were visible through the front windows. Ethan stood on the porch telling a cluster of guests, "Brooke really made this place feel like ours." Ours. That single word did something ugly in my chest. Not because I needed loud public credit. Because I understood, watching him say it again and again, that he was speaking ownership into existence one repetition at a time, training everyone around him to accept it as plain fact. Then came the social editing, and it was worse than the usual tired Instagram betrayal you see in every version of this kind of story. Brooke posted a Christmas photo from the staircase landing I had specifically chosen at closing, because it reminded me of the kind of warm home my mother would have loved. Her caption read, "Just a quiet family holiday in our home." My father commented with a heart emoji and the words, "So proud of the life you two are building." My name appeared nowhere, not in the post, not in the comments, not anywhere in the story of how that house had come to exist in the first place. A few weeks after that, a friend forwarded me a screenshot of Ethan answering a college buddy on Facebook who'd asked how he managed to buy a house so young. His answer, "Family helped. Dad made it happen." I stared at that sentence until my phone screen dimmed on its own. He hadn't just erased me. He had taken my sacrifice and formally reassigned it to the one person who had spent half my life making absolutely sure I understood exactly where I ranked. The smallest wound somehow cut the deepest. I had once picked out a simple navy wreath for the front door, because Ethan mentioned Brooke liked understated decor. The next autumn, I drove past and saw she'd replaced it with a monogram wreath, an elegant interlocking H&T Harrington and Thompson. Not Ava. Not even something neutral. A literal, public symbol announcing exactly who counted inside that house, and who didn't. I remember sitting at a red light near that house, both hands gripping the steering wheel, asking myself a question that embarrassed me with how long it had managed to survive inside me. Why am I still hoping? Why, after every forgotten birthday, every sidelined holiday, every small public lie, was some stubborn part of me still waiting for an invitation that would finally mean I belonged? If you had paid for your brother's house, and you watched him smile under a new home banner while your own name quietly vanished from the picture, how would that sit with you? Let me know honestly in the comments, because I still ask myself that question. My $572,000 gift hadn't bought me a place inside my family. It had only made it easier for them to remove me from it entirely. The lie finally cracked, fully and irreversibly, because of one phone call from a colleague named Jenna Morales. Jenna and I had worked enough Columbus real estate closings together that she knew the difference between idle gossip and information someone genuinely had a right to hear. "Ava, this is awkward," she said one evening over the phone, her voice careful. "But a man I'm pretty sure is your brother just asked a real estate attorney about filing a quitclaim deed and long-term occupancy rights on a property he doesn't currently hold title to." I went cold sitting in my own kitchen. A quitclaim deed meant Ethan wasn't satisfied anymore with simply acting like the house was his. He wanted the legal paperwork to finally catch up with the lie he'd been telling everyone for 2 years. I said almost nothing on that call. I thanked Jenna, hung up, and drove straight to Maria's house without even changing out of my work clothes. She listened without interrupting once. Then she disappeared into her home office and came back carrying my entire file. The deed. Tax receipts. Insurance documentation. Every single proof of ownership, organized and intact. "Your mother did not leave me all of this paperwork because she trusted your father to do the right thing," she said quietly, setting the folder on the table between us. "She left it because she knew there was a real chance he wouldn't." That was the night Maria finally showed me a copy of the original guardianship instructions my mother had signed before she died. In the margin, beside my name, written in her own handwriting, my mother had left a single sentence. "She will try to earn love by overgiving. Don't let that destroy her." I had to sit down after reading that. My mother had predicted me, my exact flaw, with terrifying accuracy, years before I'd even know to recognize it in myself. What followed wasn't one dramatic discovery. It was a slow, methodical montage of evidence that turned my stomach precisely because it was so deliberate. Ethan had quietly untagged me from old family photos online, one by one. Brooke had started referring to my father as the one who helped us build our home. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Ethan had introduced himself at Brooke's engagement dinner as basically an only child. And my father had told at least 2 people at his country club that the house was simply part of what I was able to do for the kids. He hadn't just accepted the lie. He had personally polished it for public display. I spent one entire midnight alone in my office, city lights reflected in the conference room glass, screenshotting posts and messages, quietly lining up facts like evidence for a trial I had never once wanted to hold. Then Ethan texted me, a man stepping casually toward his own undoing without realizing it. "Hey, random question. If we want to simplify things before the wedding, could you sign a quick claim after the honeymoon? Cleaner for future planning." Cleaner. My silence lasted 12 minutes. Then I typed back, "Future planning for whom?" He never answered. The next morning, Brooke sent me the first direct message she had ever sent me in 2 years. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't create stress this close to the wedding. Ethan says paperwork has made you emotional." That was the exact moment something inside me clicked shut, calmly and permanently. I met with a property attorney named Russell Tate, someone Maria trusted completely, in a downtown Columbus office where every surface seemed specifically designed to discourage any kind of melodrama. He reviewed the deed, the tax records, the insurance payments, and Ethan's text messages without a single change in expression. "Legally," he finally said, removing his glasses, "your brother is an occupant. Not an owner. Not a beneficiary. Not even a tenant with rights beyond a standard notice period." He paused. "An occupant?" I asked the only question that mattered. "If I sell it, can he stop me?" Russell didn't hesitate for even a second. "No." He found a buyer faster than I expected, a military family relocating from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, drawn to the school district, ready and willing to close immediately if we structured a short post-closing occupancy period before move-in. That detail mattered more than anything else in this entire story. It meant the sale could be completed, recorded, and made fully irreversible before the wedding, while technically still allowing Ethan and Brooke to use the house for the reception, before receiving formal, fully legal notice to vacate. Clean. Legal. Ruthless only in the sense that the truth had simply arrived later than it should have. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in June. Russell set our closing for the Friday before, at 3:40 in the afternoon. I signed every page with a hand steadier than I expected, steadier than felt like mine. The sale recorded that afternoon. The funds hit my account before dinner. Russell prepared the formal notice to vacate for service the next day, addressed to the occupants, effective 30 days from receipt. Fully, completely compliant with the law. We agreed on one final thing, a single short email, to Ethan, Brooke, and my father, with exactly 3 attachments. The recorded deed in my name. The signed sale contract. The notice to vacate. No speech attached. No vengeance monologue. Just facts and deadlines and documents, the same way every other closing in my career had ever ended. When I left Russell's office, I sat alone in my car and cried for exactly 4 minutes by the clock on my dashboard. Not because I doubted what I'd done, I didn't doubt it for even a second. I cried because I finally understood, fully and completely, that the bridge I'd believed I was building with that house had never actually been a bridge at all. It had been a stage prop in someone else's story, and I had spent years confusing the role of prop with the role of family. When your own brother starts quietly searching for legal ways to take the house you bought him outright, and your father helps rehearse the lie that makes it possible, the gift has already become a blade. All that's left to decide is who finally stops bleeding first. The wedding day arrived bright, sunny, and offensively beautiful. The kind of Ohio summer Saturday that makes people believe in easy, uncomplicated happiness. I didn't go to the church. I parked 6 blocks away and sat with old jazz playing quietly, because complete silence felt too sharp to sit inside for very long. Jenna texted me updates in fragments from inside the ceremony. Brooke's dress is insane. Your dad is acting like he's hosting the royal wedding. Ethan looks very pleased with himself. I kept imagining my mother sitting beside me in that car, not exactly approving of what I was about to do, but no longer asking me to carry a weight that should have broken years before this day ever arrived. After the ceremony, I drove toward Maple Crest Drive and parked 3 blocks from the house. The reception was scheduled there, printed on thick cream invitations describing it as the couple's home. At 5:52 p.m., the first guests began arriving. Caterers moved trays through the kitchen. Valet cones went up along the curb. The string lights I had personally paid to install came alive over the backyard. At 6:11 p.m., the wedding party's shuttle pulled up out front. Jenna called me, whispering like she was narrating something illegal in progress. They're here. Brooke's getting out. Your dad's already on the front steps. Ethan's doing that fake humble smile. What happened next is the image I still think about most. Not because it was loud, because it was precise, almost surgical in its timing. Russell's courier had calculated the delivery perfectly. He stepped onto the porch exactly as Brooke reached the front walk, bouquet still in hand, and asked, politely, for the occupants of record to accept a legal packet. Ethan tried to wave him off with the easy arrogance of a man having the best day of his life. Brooke took the envelope instead. That alone was enough to make the yard go quieter. Brides are allowed to open anything handed to them on their own wedding day. Nobody questions it. She scanned the first page, frowned, and opened the second. Jenna stopped whispering entirely. "Oh my God," she said, very softly. Brooke looked up at Ethan and asked it, not loudly, but clearly enough that the front half of the gathered guests heard every word. "Who is Ava Thompson?" Nobody moved. My father started forward. Ethan reached for the papers. Brooke took one full step back in her wedding dress, kept the packet firmly in her own hand, and asked again, sharper this time. "Who is Ava Thompson? And why does this deed say she owns this house?" That was the kind of silence that doesn't exist in dramatic movies. The real kind. Shoes shifting on stone. Ice settling in a drink somewhere. A violinist stopping mid-note because even he could feel the air in the yard physically shift. At 6:19 p.m., while all of them stood frozen at the front walk, I sent the email. Subject: Property records. The property at 114 Maple Crest Drive closed on June 14th. Attached are 1. The recorded deed showing my ownership, 2. The signed sale agreement, and 3. The formal notice to vacate within 30 days. I wish you both a long and honest marriage. Ava. 3 attachments. No adjectives. No pleading. No rage in a single sentence. Jenna texted me 1 second later. Your father just checked his phone. Now Ethan looks like he might pass out. Now Brooke is reading the email. I sat in my car with both hands resting on the wheel, feeling neither triumphant nor shattered, just incredibly, unfamiliarly still. Inside that house, champagne sat chilling in silver buckets. In the yard, 200 guests waited for a reception that had just quietly turned into a reckoning. While they were preparing to raise their glasses to a future built on a lie, I had already signed the papers that ended the role they had written for me 18 years earlier. While they were arriving at a house they believed was part of their perfect story, the truth was already standing on the porch, waiting politely for someone to open the envelope. In the middle of their celebration, I had finally done the one thing my family never once believed I was capable of doing. I had chosen myself. Jenna's call that night lasted 43 minutes, and I remember every detail because real revenge, when it actually happens, is almost never a single explosion. It's a structure collapsing one beam at a time, in full view of everyone standing close enough to watch. Brooke stood on the front walk, veil pinned crookedly over one shoulder, rereading the deed as if the words on the page might rearrange themselves if she stared at them long enough. Ethan tried speed first. Ava's my sister, he said, too fast, too casual, already sounding guilty before he finished the sentence. She helped us out temporarily. It's complicated. My father stepped in with the tone he always used when he believed volume could substitute for truth. Today is not the day for legal confusion. Brooke ignored him completely. She looked at Ethan and asked, evenly, "You told my parents your father helped you buy this house. You told me this house was effectively yours. You told me you had no sister close enough to invite to our wedding. Why is her name on the deed?" Ethan's mouth opened and closed without producing anything useful. Brooke's mother, Margaret Harrington, reached the porch by then, accepted the packet directly from her daughter, and absorbed the entire disaster within seconds. Jenna told me Margaret's expression shifted from polite social composure to something closer to aristocratic contempt almost instantly, fast enough to be almost elegant. "The reception can wait," Margaret said. "The explanation cannot." They moved the confrontation from the front walk into the foyer, but the open double doors and the stalled flow of guests meant half the reception heard pieces of it anyway. "She's being dramatic. That's not what happened. Dad, say something." "Then, clearly, then why did you tell me it was only for the closest family?" Brooke repeated that exact phrase back at him on purpose, because in his panic, Ethan had already admitted he'd said those exact words to me. Jenna said Brooke's expression didn't shift into tears at that line. It shifted into clarity. She unwound the ribbon from her bouquet and handed the flowers off to a bridesmaid without breaking eye contact with him once. "You told your own sister she wasn't close enough for your wedding," she said, "after she bought you this house." "My father tried to redirect the blame toward me. Ava has always made things theatrical," he said. Brooke didn't raise her voice. "That's probably exactly why it landed as hard as it did." "No, Richard. She made things legal. You made things shameful." That was when Margaret took complete control of the room. She asked Ethan one direct question, in front of nearly everyone gathered near the entrance, groomsmen, both photographers, the wedding planner, and far more guests than anyone could pretend not to notice. "Did you lie to my daughter about home ownership, about your sister, and about your family structure?" Ethan reached for the half-confession liars always reach for once full denial has already died in their mouths. "I simplified things." "Then let me simplify something for you," Margaret said. "My daughter does not marry into fraud." Brooke still did not cry. She looked at the papers once more, then at Ethan, then at my father. "How many times did she ask to be included before today?" she asked. Nobody answered. That silence answered the question for them. Brooke took off her wedding ring, technically not yet legally hers, just the band Ethan had slid onto her finger inside the church an hour earlier, and set it on the foyer table beside the notice to vacate. Jenna said you could actually hear the metal tap against the wood. That small, ordinary sound was enough to break whatever illusion still remained in that room. Brooke didn't leave him at the altar. She did something arguably worse. She stayed present and fully conscious while his image quietly died in front of everyone who mattered most to him. She turned to the gathered guests and said, "I'm sorry you drove here under false pretenses. Please eat, if you'd like, the food is already paid for. But before anyone raises a glass to this marriage, I need it understood that the house attached to this reception belongs to the sister who was excluded from it, and that information was deliberately hidden from me." It wasn't shouted. It was disclosure. And in a family circle built entirely on reputation, public disclosure functions like a quiet execution. Within the hour, Brooke's father had cancelled the extended photography package on the spot. Margaret had the wedding planner remove every piece of signage that read the couple's home. Brooke herself called the honeymoon travel coordinator while still standing in her dress and cancelled the trip before dessert was even served. Then, in front of both families, she laid out 3 conditions for there being any marriage left to speak of by Monday morning. First, an ironclad post-nuptial agreement, drafted entirely by her own family's attorneys, separating her assets from every debt, claim, or lie he'd touched. Second, complete financial disclosure, every message, every debt, every detail connected to the house. Third, a direct, public apology to me, in his own words, in front of witnesses who already understood exactly what it meant. My father tried to object. Margaret cut him off with a single sentence that apparently made even Ethan sit down without being asked twice. "You are not in a position to negotiate anything tonight." The reception never recovered. Guests stayed only long enough to gather the facts and carry them home. Some ate, because the food was already plated and wealthy people don't tend to waste a catered meal on principle. But nobody danced. The DJ stood idle for almost an hour before quietly packing up early. The best man avoided Ethan entirely once he understood the full story. One of Brooke's cousins openly asked whether Ethan had lied about other assets too. A bridesmaid asked, point blank, why she'd never once heard my name mentioned in 2 full years of wedding planning. My father spent the rest of the night working small clusters of guests with the brittle authority of a man who couldn't yet understand why the room had quietly stopped taking him seriously. Every time he repeated "it's a family misunderstanding," someone else answered with a closer version of the truth. A misunderstanding doesn't cost $572,000. A misunderstanding doesn't erase a sister from every photo and post for 2 years. A misunderstanding doesn't end with a formal notice to vacate. By 10:15 that night, the careful story my father had spent years curating, respectable patriarch, golden son, good family, stable home, had quietly become a cautionary tale, passed mouth to mouth, under string lights I had personally paid to install. The punishment didn't end that night. That was only the opening statement. Within a week, the story had reached my father's country club in the exact form that hurts men like him most, quietly and with full detail. There was drama at the wedding. Worse, he let people believe he bought the house. His own daughter paid for everything, and she wasn't even invited. The bride found out about it on the front steps. A retired judge refused to join my father's regular golf foursome the following Saturday, saying plainly he didn't enjoy spending his weekends with men who froze out their own daughters. A business owner quietly withdrew from a charity board initiative my father had hoped would raise his public profile. Another man told him outright, "If you can rewrite your own daughter out of your life this easily, I don't know what your word is actually worth." That line got repeated often enough that my father simply stopped showing up to lunch at the club for a while. Respectable men can usually survive private cruelty without much trouble. They very rarely survive a public loss of credibility. Ethan's damage took a different shape. Brooke didn't file for an immediate annulment, but she moved out and stayed with her parents for 3 full weeks. The money set aside for the honeymoon quietly became attorney retainer money instead. Her friends unfollowed him online in slow waves after Brooke posted a single restrained story that read, "The truth you find after the wedding tells you whether you were loved or managed." She never tagged him. She never needed to. In the social circles she moved through, ambiguity with the right context functions exactly like a blade. Professionally, the damage was quieter but just as real. Ethan worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech firm where polished personal branding genuinely mattered to leadership. One senior client happened to know the Harrington family socially. Another had actually attended the reception in person. Suddenly, Ethan was no longer being considered for the client-facing leadership track he'd been bragging about all spring. Officially, nothing punitive ever happened in writing. Unofficially, he simply stopped being trusted with image-sensitive work. Reputations rarely collapse dramatically in an HR meeting. More often, they just quietly stop being invited upward. Then came the calls. My father called first, the next morning, furious, demanding to know what exactly I had done. I told him, simply, that I had sold my house. He told me I had ruined his son's wedding. I told him, just as simply, that Ethan had ruined his own wedding the moment he built it on a lie. Then he made the mistake of invoking my mother. "Elena would be ashamed of you," he said. I had been waiting 18 years for a sentence finally worth answering directly. "No," I told him, calm as glass. "Mom would be ashamed that you made her daughter buy her way to the edge of this family, and still wouldn't let her all the way in." He hung up. Ethan called later that same week, his voice wrecked, switching between anger and bargaining so quickly it almost sounded like a child trying different keys in the wrong lock, one after another. He threatened to sue. I told him to go ahead and try. He said we were family. I asked him whether that was true before or after he told his own bride he was basically an only child. Silence on the line. Then tears, real ones, maybe. But even then, when I asked the only question that actually mattered, sorry for what, exactly? He couldn't answer it. He couldn't name the theft out loud, because naming it would also mean naming exactly who he'd taken it from. A week later, Russell confirmed that the legal challenge Ethan had threatened went absolutely nowhere. His own attorney reviewed every document and delivered the truth in one sentence: "You have no claim." 30 days after the wedding, Ethan and Brooke moved out of Maplecrest Drive for good. The new owners, that military family from Wright-Patterson, painted the front door a deep, solid red. Jenna sent me a photo of it. I stared at that picture for a long time, waiting for some kind of triumphant feeling to arrive. It didn't, and that surprised me more than almost anything else in this whole story. I had imagined revenge as heat, something loud and burning and satisfying. Instead, it felt like emptiness, followed slowly by air. Lighter, but strange. Unfamiliar, the way a room feels after you finally take down curtains that had been hanging there for so long you'd stopped noticing they blocked the light. And the weeks after the wedding, I kept waiting to feel victorious. I never quite did. What I felt first, underneath everything else, was quiet, the specific kind of quiet that only arrives once you finally stop begging people to love you the way they always should have, all along, without being asked. I used part of the proceeds from the sale to pay off student debt I should never have had to carry alone in the first place. And with Maria's help, I used another portion to create the Ava Thompson Foundation, a small fund supporting young women who lose their mothers early and have to build entire lives without the support they were always supposed to have. I wanted something genuinely good to come out of the last gift I would ever give that version of my family. Then I bought a house, just for myself. Not a grand one. A warm, simple place with a front porch and good morning light spilling into the kitchen. The deed has exactly one name on it. Mine. On the first night there, I set my mother's photo on a small shelf by the front door and said quietly, "I finally bought a house for the right person." Ethan sent me a letter, months later. My father never did. Brooke reached out once, respectfully, and I genuinely appreciated that she made the effort. But by then, I had already learned the most important lesson of my entire life. Closure doesn't always come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes it only comes from the moment you finally stop waiting for them to become someone different than who they've always shown you they are. I used to believe family meant sacrifice. I used to believe that if I gave enough, stayed patient enough, loved hard enough, for long enough, they would finally, eventually, see me. I was wrong. Love without respect isn't family. It's survival dressed up in family language. And survival is not the same thing as belonging. So if you've ever been treated like the backup child, the dependable one, the one expected to give and forgive endlessly while everyone else gets to simply receive, hear me say this clearly: setting a boundary is not cruelty. Sometimes it is the very first real act of self-respect you've ever been allowed to give yourself. If this story spoke to something in you, type the word boundary in the comments below. I read every single one. And remember this, because it took me 32 years and $572,000 to fully understand it myself. Money can buy a house. It will never buy your place in someone's heart. Sometimes the only way to actually save yourself is to finally, completely, stop paying the price for people who are always willing to lose you.